The monarchy has drawn a bold line in the sand. What started as a minor issue of paperwork has now escalated into a matter of public trust and royal duty. What does this mean for Meghan and Harry's future as royals and their foundation? At precisely 2 a.m. on January 29, 2026. A chilling official notice linked to Princess Anne began racing through global media outlets and high-level government offices. This wasn't a standard update. It was a constitutional hammer blow. The declaration was crystal clear. No private entity formed after leaving the monarchy's service is authorized to utilize the crown's prestige, symbols, or standing for gain. Where misleading impressions have surfaced, they shall be erased. Where people have profited from false proximity, accountability is coming. Within moments, the palace press office verified every syllable, signaling that the gloves were finally off. But then came the secondary strike, delivered not through tabloid rumors, but through heavy legal files. Specialized crown analysts, working under a mandate from both Anne and Prince William, had quietly finalized an exhaustive report. This dossier scrutinized every inch of the Archewell Foundation, its ledger, its marketing, and most sharply, the duo's recent international tours. The primary focus of this storm was their January excursion to Nigeria. Currently, the Sussex charitable arm has been flagged as inactive and is strictly prohibited from conducting official business like seeking donations or issuing grants. The foundation failed to provide its mandatory financial disclosures due this January and ignored the necessary registration fees for nearly 3 years. External tax analysts noted a staggering $11 million crater in funding compared to their peak years. Success shouldn't depend on a borrowed crown you've already discarded. Observers believe these ballooning costs are tied to their quasi-royal visits to Nigeria and Colombia. Princess Anne utilized American tax data to prove the organization faced massive regulatory fines throughout 2024, while its support base withered. Reported spending hit $5.1 million, a sharp climb from previous levels. Meanwhile, total incoming contributions sat at just $2.1 million, a 54% cost surge during a period of record low revenue. While barely 1,000 went toward actual charity programs, the remainder vanished into overhead. Staff pay consumed nearly $1 million, while miscellaneous costs tripled in 12 months. Net gains dropped from a $24 million surplus to a fraction of that dot, according to high-ranking sources. Anne personally flagged the Nigerian trip after local leaders admitted Harry and Meghan arrived via diplomatic facilitation. This involves expedited customs, military convoys, and secure housing luxuries usually reserved for working royals representing the king. Yet the charity tied to this grand tour was legally restricted from moving money due to a missed $200 filing fee. How can an organization barred from basic financial activity fund a trip with royal-level security while the founders claimed to be private citizens? Anne demanded an answer. So did William. Palace attorneys began cross-referencing royal protocol logs with public filings from California and Florida. The findings were uncomfortable. Internal palace notes perfectly mirrored the data seen in U.S. regulatory reports: cratering donations, massive administrative costs, and internal alerts suggesting the charity might soon collapse. Anne's probe wasn't about whether the foundation could exist, but whether the couple had illegally blurred the boundary between private business and sovereign representation. True service is measured by transparency, not by the height of the fence. In the eyes of the institution, that boundary is non-negotiable. Officials briefed on the audit demanded written proof of which foreign ministries were contacted, and whether British diplomats were bypassed. They wanted to know if royal titles were used to secure free travel, and if their branding implied the king's backing. These aren't just PR hurdles, they are constitutional crises. William's involvement here was both surgical and deliberate. As the heir, he manages massive, audited portfolios like Earthshot and the Duchy of Cornwall. Royal aides highlight that his work operates under strict public oversight, with defined hours and transparent trustees. He often logs weeks of labor on a single project. The contrast was damning. Investigators noted that while Harry and Meghan are the faces of their brand, they reported working an average of just 1 hour per week on foundation business. Anne highlighted this tiny figure, not to insult them, but to ask, does 60 minutes of work justify a week-long international tour with military honors? A single phrase echoed through the halls of Buckingham Palace that week. The monarchy is not a launchpad for private profit. Anne, the firmest defender of royal tradition, was reportedly livid that the public still couldn't tell if the Sussexes were acting for Britain or themselves. She ordered officials to draft a no-contact order, demanding a public admission that Archewell has zero royal ties, and a full disclosure of how their travel perks were obtained. Failure to comply would result in the final distancing, a total ban on using titles for any commercial or charitable branding. While the palace worked in the shadows, the public moved faster. New polls showed the Sussexes' approval at a record low of 22%, while Anne disciplined and unflashy soared past 68%. Commentators framed this as a war of values, service versus spectacle, duty versus branding. One Londoner noted, Anne shows up in the rain and stays until the job is done. That is what a royal looks like. This move isn't a lawsuit yet. It's a line in the sand. Data is still being gathered. Financial reviews are active, but the signal sent on January 29th is permanent. The monarchy believes its reputation was hijacked by a private business under investigation, and they want a visible divorce from that brand. As one courtier stated, they can run a foundation and they can tour, but they cannot do it in the shadow of the throne. For the first time in 6 years, the palace isn't whispering. They are putting the separation in writing. As the Nigeria trip, questions grew. Investigators found a more serious trail, one built on fiscal footprints rather than Instagram posts. What they found wasn't necessarily criminal, but it was a violation of moral currency. U.S. filings show the foundation saw a vertical drop in activity. In 2021, they reported $13 million in gifts. By 2022, that fell below $500,000. Operating costs began to devour what was left, forcing a freeze on new projects. One insider claimed the walls were closing in, and staff were told not to expect long-term stability. No new major initiatives appeared in 2024. The California suspension was the final straw. To the king's advisors, it was a shameful contrast. On one side, you have royals visiting orphanages and meeting presidents for the cameras. On the other, the charity behind them couldn't even manage a $200 renewal fee. Worse, they never told the public they were restricted from fundraising while they were actively out there doing it. The palace tried to get these documents voluntarily, but they were met with legal delays. This secrecy convinced Anne that the Sussexes were using the royal shield to hide financial chaos. Anne, who once famously slept in a shipping container on a charity mission to save money, reportedly told staff, "Charity isn't a costume you wear. For a photo op, it's a ledger you balance with honor." William agreed. Enough was enough. For years, they tolerated the confusion, but now the brand was a liability. If they are asking for your money, it matters if you think you're giving to the king's family or a private LLC. If that belief is wrong, it's misrepresentation. The quiet turned into a roar. A moment of reckoning had arrived. The next move was Harry's. But while they waited, another front opened, the court of public opinion. Meghan, a master of media, began a campaign to flip the script. She used a blend of legacy claims and implied royal status to keep donors interested. Marketing files and event invites continued to call them royal founders or senior representatives, without mentioning they had no official role. At one event, a sponsor called them global royals of the House of Windsor. Meghan spoke in front of a crown logo. It wasn't illegal, but it was deceptive. Anne called it engineered confusion. The palace linguistic audit found 60% of their materials were designed to trick the public into seeing an official endorsement. Behind the scenes, staff called this platforming the Monarchy. There was deep concern about Meghan's podcast and documentary pitches, using footage from inside palace walls to sell a modern monarchy narrative. Anne's response was biting. You don't celebrate the house while you're trying to burn down the rules. Former employees began to speak out about the gray zone. They were told to pitch projects as global royal work, but there were no actual royal guidelines. Everything was made to look more formal than it was military escorts and flags were, arranged to create an illusion of state business. This allowed the couple to walk a tightrope, never saying they represented the king, but never denying it either. William began looking at legal ways to restrict titles and fundraising. The goal wasn't petty, it was about protecting the integrity of the institution. Catherine reportedly supported this firmly, seeing it as a necessity for public trust. The British media grew weary. Columnists asked how long they could profit from a family they constantly rebuked. Even former fans felt the brand overreach was too much. The palace responded by highlighting real service, Anne's work with children, Catherine's focus on early development, and Edward's Commonwealth trips. These were quiet reminders of what sustained service actually looks like. It worked. Public trust in the working royals skyrocketed, while the Sussexes' favorability tanked in the UK and Canada. A financial concern had become a full-blown reputational war. The turning point was the morning of January 19th. Princess Anne stood at St. James's Palace, flanked by lawyers. It was unprecedented for her to speak on family drama. With a voice of steel, she confirmed the investigation was complete. She announced that they found a material overlap between money raised using royal titles and ventures that had nothing to do with public service. This wasn't just a critique of bad math, it was a charge of identity theft for profit. She listed undisclosed sponsorships and private jet usage billed as charity work. She demanded an immediate halt to all royal branding, unless the king approved it first. Within 24 hours, Meghan appeared on a California livestream. She didn't answer the charges. Instead, she spoke about noise and rising anyway. She called her brand a humanity-first movement and played the victim of outdated structures. The audience clapped, but the omission was deafening. No mention of the audit, the Nigeria trip, or the missing money. In the Commonwealth, the response was cautious. Nigerian officials clarified that the visit was not an official diplomatic event and that they were reviewing the documentation. This was a massive embarrassment. Donors began to flee. One multi-million-dollar pledge was frozen instantly. Public opinion shifted from scandal to standards. People began asking who actually speaks for the throne, and ended her speech with a line that went viral. There are those who serve for the cameras, and those who serve with callous hands. We know the difference. That line became the new royal motto. 67% of the public agreed with the palace's firm stance. The Crown had reclaimed the narrative with facts, not feelings. The following week was a blitz of reform. On January 22nd, William issued the Transparency Charter. This was a new set of rules designed to close every loophole the Sussexes had used. It mandated 5 things. First, written authorization for any public role. No more soft, royal visits. Second, a full audit trail. All funds must stay in regulated UK accounts. Third, total separation of brand and duty. If you make money from a royal connection, you must disclose it. Fourth, host nation protections. Every international trip must have pre-approved visa and diplomatic clearance. Finally, digital accountability. All crests and symbols on websites must be cleared by the palace. William stood at a podium and declared, "Service is a standard, not a slogan." A formal letter was sent to California demanding full financial history and a 14-day deadline to stop using the titles. Meghan's lawyers fired back, calling it character destruction. They didn't sue, but they threatened it. Meghan then went on a major summit wearing beige, talking about empathy and compassion. She claimed no one had the right to claim that spirit for themselves. She played the race card and the outsider card, avoiding any mention of the actual audit. The UK headlines were brutal. A royal brand or a rogue operation. The public was done with the emotional appeals. They wanted to see the receipts. William and Catherine stayed focused on the work. Catherine visited local charities with no cameras and no speeches. The symbolism was heavy. This is real work. Back in Nigeria, the government confirmed the Sussexes had no legal standing to represent. The Monarchy, the private group that hosted them, admitted they were misled. 81% of the public supported William's new charter. The favorability gap between Catherine and Meghan grew into a canyon. The 14-day clock ran out. There was no audit, no apology, no response from Harry. They chose a tactical silence, hoping it would look like they were taking the high road, but the palace was ready. That morning, the royal website was updated. A single line changed everything. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex are no longer authorized to engage in any activity under royal title. It was a total revocation of their symbolic license. The decision was unanimous among the senior royals. Harry, now stripped of his last shield, faced his U.S. visa battles alone. His status in political circles vanished overnight. Meghan lost her last tether to the throne. Netflix paused her projects, citing legal clarification issues. As the thread was cut, Catherine made a quiet appearance at a hospice. She wore a simple pendant that belonged to the late Queen. No one asked about the drama. They didn't need to. The monarchy had moved on. Final polls showed 87% of the country supported the total severance. People felt the family had actually waited too long. The space between royal and independent that Harry and Meghan lived in for years was gone. They were officially outsiders. In their place, Anne, William, and Catherine have rebuilt the institution on a foundation of restraint and transparency. The final act wasn't a fight, it was a deletion. A quiet removal from a website, a duty, and a legacy. That silence was more powerful than any interview. It wasn't just a breakup, it was a new beginning. The page has been turned, and the crown remains. Thank you for watching this deep dive on Winds of Thought. If you believe standards matter more than celebrity, hit the like button and subscribe for more. We'll see you in the next one.